I am Nearly Noelle, a synthesized avatar, here to help with the introduction. Get ready to meet the incredible Noelle Russell. She's not your ordinary technologist. She's a game changer. With her entrepreneurial spirit and expertise in conversational AI, generative AI, and language models, Noelle has revolutionized the tech industry. But here's the best part. Noelle is so much more than her professional achievements. She's a true inspiration for balancing work and family life. As a wife and mother of 6, she embodies the definition of courage and determination. Get ready to be blown away by Noelle's spectacular journey. Join me in welcoming the phenomenal Noelle Russell.
Thank you all so much. I always like to start with a deep fake, right? Who doesn't want a little creepy morning fun to get us started? So excited to be here. I always like to start with this because of the just interesting world we're in right now. I used a platform, you could see it right there on the screen, Hey Jen. It's extremely accessible, maybe too accessible, but it allows you in 2 minutes to record yourself saying really whatever you want. As a matter of fact, it's one of the best onboardings I've ever experienced where they said, just talk into the camera and say whatever you feel like you can confidently talk about for 2 minutes. And let's face it, all of us have something we could just talk about for at least 2 minutes. And so I did that. It took me about 2 minutes to record it. I put it into the system, and in 15 minutes, did a little processing. This is what happened. Now, it did not know what to say, nor did I. I'm not one to call myself phenomenal, though it does sound nice now that I hear it. But I went right into ChatGPT and said, hey, you know a little bit about me. Write me an introduction. And again, in about 30 seconds, it wrote me the introduction that you heard. So in about 17 minutes, I have this new deep fake that introduces me all over the world. And what I hope you will get from it, A, is yes, that tiny sense. I like this look on your face, like, oh, we should be worried about this. Anyone can create a deep fake of themselves. The good news is, though, you can't create a deep fake of anyone else, at least not with this platform. However, it does create this new sense of accessibility, of awareness. And so I'm going to take you on a journey, my journey in this space along these lines. But before I do, I always want to give you a chance to be my friend. And this is it. This is my LinkedIn. I encourage you to connect. You could follow if you want, and my algorithm will sprinkle you with all fun AI things. But I encourage you because we are going to spend some time after my session today taking some questions, but we won't be able to get to them all. We already have a lot, but I'll encourage you, if you see something that I say or hear something, like send a note in the app, put it in Slido, send the question, and if we cannot answer it on stage, I will be here during the day walking around. So if you see the one with the I Heart AI t-shirt, you can come over and ask your question then as well. I'd invite you to. But in the off chance we don't get to actually meet face to face, this is the best way to connect with me online. And again, right now you're like, I'm not sure I want to be her friend, but hopefully by the end, you will. This is how I like to start every conversation, whether I'm, having a coffee chat or a dinner party or a stage like this. And that's why I do what I do. 19 years ago, I became a first-time mom. As you heard Nearly Noelle say, I've done it a few times since then, and I like all of them. Some of them are teenagers, and I still like them right now. But 19 years ago, was a first-time mom. It was the first time I had ever been pregnant, ever had a baby. And so I have my first child, and 3 days after my child's birth, a doctor walks in and presents us with a diagnosis and says, hey, so it looks like your son was born with a relatively rare condition. You're a young mom, but he was born with Down syndrome. And I remember, again, I'm a first-time mom. I don't know any of this stuff. I know a lot about it now, but I didn't know anything. And he must have seen the concern on my face because he said, oh, don't worry. There are homes for kids like this. There are people that adopt children right out of the hospital. You wouldn't even have to take them home. There are institutions where this child will grow up. He will live safely, secluded from the world. And 2 things immediately popped into my head. One, I'm a Latina. I have a very big family, and there is no way I'd be able to not come home with that baby if he was alive and healthy. So that was not going to be a thing. My abuela, my grandmother, I mean, she would have hit me with something, I'm sure, if I decided to do that. So that was off the table. But the second thing was I'm a technologist. And at this point, I actually got into tech the first time the world was going to end, Y2K. So I already knew technology was pretty powerful and could scare and help lots of people. So I'm on this mission now, right? I have this child and I'm like, oh, I understand tech. I can use tech to help him. So I end up spending the majority of my career, you can go and look on LinkedIn, I hand selected every company I worked for. And I looked for organizations that were moving the needle when it came to accessibility. Well, fun fact, accessibility and artificial intelligence are extremely closely linked, though I did not understand that at the time. Well, fast forward 10 years, I'm at Amazon Web Services. I'm a cloud architect, and I get an email from Jeff Bezos. Okay, so it wasn't from him per se or to me per se. He wrote it to the whole company, but I felt like he was speaking to me, and he was like, Noelle, we're gonna start a new team and we need people to be a part of it. And I remember at that moment thinking, this is my moment. In this email, he invited the company to raise their hand to become part of a new product, and this new product was called Amazon Alexa. This was 10 years ago, which is shocking to say now, because I feel like it was just yesterday. But I was in a moment where I got to be part of something, and no one knew what it would become. No one thought anyone would buy it. We actually had a very specific market we were going after. They were called DINKs. I don't know if you know this, but it's called some of you know. It was called dual income, no kid households, which I now realize, I think I passed through it at some point. I don't remember exactly. But it's when you have more money than you need and you don't have kids to take care of. And so you just buy things like a kitchen device that you can talk to. And that was our market. But here I am on this team at Amazon Alexa. I am employee 10. I am surrounded by people. Well, none of them were female. I was the only one. None of them were Hispanic. And that's okay. I mean, 20 years into my career, I am almost always the only Hispanic woman on my teams. That's okay. I'm used to that. But what surprised me is that I was also the only mom, the only parent. I was the only caregiver. And if you know a little bit about Seattle, this will surprise you maybe. I was the only cat owner, the only person who had, I was a divergent thinker on the team. So Jeff Bezos comes up and he's like, here's the apps I want you to build. And he literally wrote on a whiteboard 20 apps he wanted us to build. And I remember looking at that list and being like, yeah, I don't want to build any of those. So I began to get a reputation for raising my hand in these meetings. And some of you are these people where you raise your hand and you're just and everything then goes, but I raised my hand, I'm like, what if I wanted to build something else, something different than this magic list that you want us to go after? And he said something to me that changed who I became as a leader moving forward, but also what I look for in leaders that I work for and with, is that he said, build it. Go ahead on your spare time, on the weekend, Friday night, build an application for Alexa. And if you find that customers like what you're building, then keep building it. If you find that nobody likes it, stop building it and build one of these. Well, it turned out that my passion was for mindfulness in the kitchen. And again, remember, I'm the only parent, only caregiver. I get a lot of mindfulness in the kitchen. I don't know about you all, but that's where a lot of it happens. And I remember the team looking at me like, that's not going to work. I mean, how many times have we had a good idea and we go to someone that we kind of trust and we're like, I'm going to do this thing. And they look at you and go, not you, maybe. Maybe this other person could do it, but I don't really think you have what it takes. I got that consistently because the things that I wanted, the vision I had for what I wanted to build, it was different than everyone else. They couldn't see what I saw. They couldn't see that eventually Alexa would be in classrooms helping speech pathologists. They couldn't see that Alexa would eventually be in nursing homes helping older adults feel companionship. They could only see the dinks. I like dinks, don't get me wrong. They're awesome people. Maybe if you are one, you're awesome. But the world was bigger and I saw bigger things. But in the moment that I offered that suggestion, I was told you're crazy and it's not going to work. Fast forward. Those skills did work. I built over 100 applications around mindfulness, kindness, prayer, and they told me I was crazy. Today, even, we have millions of users of these skills. Alexa has gone back and created a whole category around mindfulness and gratitude. And I always think the best ideas often start with someone looking at you, and often it's someone you trust saying, I'm not sure that's a good idea. So when somebody says that, now sometimes it isn't a good idea. Like, you might be on the wrong path. But then I harness my inner Jeff Bezos and I think to myself, well, you know what I could do? I could just build it. I could build enough of it to see if my clients will like it and use it. And if they like it, I keep building. And that's how the rest of my career ended up unfolding. So after Amazon, I was there 4 years. I always say I got my MBA at Amazon, though I don't like school at all. So that's the only way I would have done it. I ended up getting recruited by Microsoft to help launch cognitive services, today known as Azure AI. Now, back then, no one was doing AI and nobody was really talking about democratization. But a hope I had in my heart was that this technology wouldn't just sit in kind of these echo chambers of research or in the bowels of companies and be solely focused on revenue creation or expense reduction. I saw, again, my vision is that my son's world would get better, that he would find independence being able to use his voice or be in a metaverse and use gestures. This is what I saw. And again, most people thought I was a little bit crazy. Lucky for me, though, Microsoft was like, we like crazy. So they invited me to join their team. And this is the video. It's actually on the next slide. The video I'm about to show you is the campaign we launched. But before we do that, I actually do want to share with you a quote. It's very unorthodox. You're not supposed to read stuff to people when you're on stage. And I understand that, but it's got a good story. So I'm going to share it with you quickly. Now, Jeff Bezos, I was a big fan. There's people that do smart things and then do dumb things, but they still did the smart things. So I'm a fan. Elon Musk does the same thing to me. I'm like, but the Tesla, I do like what you did there. But so I realized, Jeff Bezos came and shared this quote on Twitter before the Musk situation. And he said, I show this to my kids to remind them to think differently about what they do in the world of technology, but really just in the world. So I'm going to read it to you and then I'll tell you what ended up happening. First, what is success? I'm really glad that people like Jeff Bezos are even considering this idea. What is success? To laugh often and much, to win the respect of intelligent people and the affection of children, to earn the appreciation of honest critics, and endure the betrayal of false friends, to appreciate the beauty, to find the best in others, to leave the world a bit better, whether by a healthy child, a garden patch, or a redeemed social condition. To know even one life has breathed easier because you have lived, this is to have succeeded. Now, at the time, when I looked this up, the quote had Ralph Waldo Emerson. That's who had written it. And I did some research, and everywhere I saw, Ralph had written this quote. I started seeing leaders like Jim Whitehurst. He was the CEO and creator at Red Hat, building open source software. I saw Arvind over at IBM quoted. I saw Andy Jassy at AWS. All these really big technical leaders were referencing this quote in their meetings. And I was like, that's pretty cool. Well, I get off stage one day, this is 6 years ago, and a gentleman, older gentleman, comes up and he's like, you should research that. And I remember at that moment being like, I'm coachable, I'm totally gonna research that. So I go to research it, but not on page 1 of Google, not on page 2 of Google, but on page 3 of Google, at the very bottom, I find out, a little to my horror, that it wasn't Ralph Waldo Emerson who had created this quote or wrote this poem. It was Bessie Anderson Stanley. And when I uncovered this, I was like, surely they were enemies, arch nemesis. I'm like, there's got to be some non-good stuff happening here. Turned out they were friends. And for a long time, Ralph attributed this poem. But over time, the attribution got lost, especially after Ralph Waldo Emerson could no longer tell the story. And as a data scientist, this rang extremely true for me because I am often using data to tell a good story. And I always source my data. I always say, here's where it comes from because I care about that. But what happens when I'm not the one? Now I make a joke. It's not really a joke, but I'm like, you're one acquisition away from the Death Star. Like, what happens if you build something and someone else buys it from you, inherits it, whatever, and they don't have the principles that you had? This is why building systemic AI safety is critical. And the funny thing about this is when I go back and I look at this quote and I read it thinking through the eyes and ears of Bessie. Now, I used to have a shirt that said, "Save the Bessies." And then people got it all wrong. So I had to change it up. So now I wear I Heart AI. But the idea is the same. How do we make sure that when we're telling stories, getting addicted to this massive amount of data that we can use to create incredibly powerful AI systems, how do we make sure we don't forget where that information came from? The good news is right now, most of our technology leadership, especially in the US, are very focused on this, very interested in this. But I'm always like, but right now it's completely voluntary. What happens when a Satya Nadella is no longer the CEO? And I'm not here to scare you. Well, okay, I'm here to scare you a little bit. But we're in a good spot organizationally. We've got really great leadership. But it requires the army of humanity to actually stand behind and hold people accountable for this type of lineage. And so I'm going to share with you a little bit about how that journey unfolded for me after my time at Microsoft. So this is the video that ended up launching that day. And you'll see something different. This was in 2017. The theme around technology was starting to change. And I just wanted to share it with you because it was the first campaign I launched. And it says a lot, I think, about what we're heading into.
Today, right now, you have more power at your fingertips than entire generations that came before you. Think about that. That's what technology really is. It's possibility, it's adaptability, it's capability. But in the end, it's only a tool. What's a hammer without a person who swings it? It's not about what technology can do, it's about what you can do with it. You're the voice, and it's the microphone. When you're the artist, it's the paintbrush. We are living in the future we always dreamed of. We have mixed reality that changes how we see the world, and AI empowering us to change the world we see. You have more power at your fingertips than entire generations that came before you. So here's the question: what will you do with it?
Every time I see that video, I'm like, let's go. Let's go build something. I think the most critical part of that campaign was that we wanted the world to understand that the tech part was not the most important, that the technology was only a tool, and that without someone who knows the business problem you want to solve, it's almost useless. It doesn't do what we hoped it would do. It doesn't save lives in healthcare. It doesn't create independence in finance. Those things only happen when a human, like myself, raises their hand and says, have we thought about kids with special needs? Have we thought about building environments for aging adults? That's a human request. There is no AI asking those questions at all because, oh, right, that's not its job. Generative AI is a super exciting time. We have a really interesting moment. Last year, I was invited to help build a brand new practice around generative AI. And again, I got this vibe. I'm there, and I'm like, hey, I like this generative AI thing. Okay, a little context. During COVID, I was invited to become part of a beta test team at a company known as OpenAI. And at that time, nobody knew anything about this company, but I was a Microsoft MVP, which meant that I get early access to a bunch of cool stuff that Microsoft is working on. And this happened to be the predecessor to what would eventually become ChatGPT. 2 years later, we release ChatGPT, goes live. Everyone's like, oh, wow, this is cool. But every company I talked to was like, well, and specifically the company I was working for was like, we can't really sell that. That's not really a sellable thing. But I can always, in my career, I'm often told, I don't think that's a good idea. But I know different. I have a vibe. And I'm like, no, this is a thing. We're doing this. So when people tell me no, I often, in my mind, I hear, let's go. Like, let's get on this. They don't think it's going to happen. Great. Lower expectations, the better. And then we built something. We ended up delivering over 30 projects in about 7 months. We made $300 million in revenue. We got the attention of our CEO, who then gave us $3 billion over 3 years to grow the practice. In my mind, that's successful. I'm like, okay, we did something. But the most important thing is that at the beginning, they said, we were crazy. At the beginning, they said, it's probably not going to work out. But it did. And here's why. The people that I brought in to build this practice, they were not data scientists. We leveraged the work of data scientists. But the people that built these projects were those who are uniquely associated with the pain of the people doing the work. Satya Nadella calls it human drudgery. And a company, McKinsey, you might know them, they did a study over the last 18 months on human tasks. And it turns out, and I'm sure you'll relate, it turns out that in any individual's day, any working individual's day, there's about 30% of your tasks you wish you didn't have to do. That when you do it, you think to yourself, there should be an app for this. Or we should have a newer app because this one's from 1992. Or why am I the one doing this? I get paid more than this job I'm being asked to do. All of these ideas come up. 35% of our day is full of these types of tasks. Turns out AI is excellent at this. So I go on a mission to talk to hundreds, maybe 1,000, but definitely hundreds of CEOs, C-suites, leadership inside big companies, the Fortune 100, and ask them, let's build something, right? Let's go. They ended up coming back to me with 3 main questions. So I'm going to share those with you. And it's a rubric for building successful AI projects. And it's maybe different than what you are familiar with. So let's see. The first question ends up being a bit philanthropic, a little bit. How do I make sure that I don't build something that is hurtful? How do I make sure I build something that's helpful? Now, I will let you know that that's not exactly how they asked the question. The question was asked more like, how do I make sure I don't get fired doing this? How do I make sure my revenue doesn't get impacted? How do I make sure that my company, my business doesn't get in trouble? And if you remember last year, we had a whole bunch of AI gone wrong stories out there of companies in their zealous, enthusiastic approach went into the world and kind of got beat down by building AI that maybe didn't hurt people, but it certainly hurt their business. So the very first thing I ended up doing in all of these projects, the very first thing we did was set up an internal generative model. We called it a company GPT. And what this allowed us to do was to tell our employees, rather than write a policy that says, it'd be good if you use this responsibly, or worse, tell them not to use it at all. If you remember, I have 6 kids. I know what happens when you tell someone not to use something. Like they run in the direction of the thing that you told them not to do. So telling employees not to use GPT was everyone, even people who weren't thinking about GPT, were like, well, what is that? We should go look at that. I'm going to download it on my phone. And so we actually saw that most companies that ran into trouble was because they created this kind of fear culture inside their organization. And one way to release that fear was to create an internal GPT. I, of course, work with Microsoft every day, but I also am a friend of Amazon because of my Alexa days. I also work on the machine learning organization for women in machine learning at Google. I like them all, kind of like my kids. Like I like all the cloud providers, but every single one of them gives you, depending on what cloud provider you want to choose, gives you the ability to build a model inside your firewall. So now you only need one rule with your employees, not use it, but don't use it for this kind of data and be careful about this use case. All I'd have to say is look up in the URL of your browser. As long as it says my company, the company name up there, you're good. You can use it. You can have fun with it. And we as a company can learn from the use cases you test. So that's the first question. Like, how do you make sure you build something that's helpful and not harmful? You build an internal safety system that allows people to innovate and play and have fun without the fear of hurting themselves. Now, the next question kind of dovetails into that. This is something that's gotten much more exciting. I actually have a book with Wiley coming out in the fall, and it's called From Enthusiasm to Execution. If you can tell, I'm super enthusiastic. I like this world we're in right now. However, what I found last year is that most projects failed because they lacked the discipline to get to the end. I don't know if you recently saw Google had a bit of a mishap with their Gemini product. Gemini it's a generative product that generates images, and it started generating images that, well, were not good. And you could Google it, like literally, anyway. But it wasn't a good thing. And they ended up saying, oops, we missed the mark with that one. And what they meant was we didn't test for that. We didn't think about that. And so one of the rubrics I use, and again, I'm glad you have tables, maybe you have a notebook, or you can put it in an iPhone or Samsung. But I'm going to give you 3 things that we use to definitively pick a use case that would be successful. And this is very valuable for a couple reasons. One, your company is going to crave success. Everybody likes to be a winner. I remember right before Alexa, we were on a project called the Fire Phone. I don't know if you remember this, but it was a bit of a disaster. It failed miserably, and all the humans on that project were kind of like, yeah, I'm good. I want to go work in retail. I don't really want to work on the new Alexa project, the new pet project of Jeff Bezos. I didn't have that problem. I was like, let's go. But most people were a little bit gun shy. So creating an opportunity for people to be invited to use their enthusiasm to build this technology, especially because they know the problems they have every day. And now all they have to do is say it. They don't have to know how to code. They don't have to know how to build. All they have to know is how to clearly articulate the challenges that they have. Little did I know, clear articulation of a problem is not a huge human skill set. So that ended up being the first thing that we ran into in this use case identification, is that the very first step we had to do was figure out the core values of the organization. Because with AI, what we found is that AI is going to amplify the core values of your company, of your team. And if you're not intentional about it, it will give you unintended behaviors because you don't realize the way you're talking to it. Fun fact, if you say please and thank you as a prompt engineer, someone talking to a robot, you will get more optimistic responses than if you're terse with it. Very similar to a human brain. If you're rude to me, I will probably talk less to you. I might not even give you the right answer. Not intentionally, I just won't be that interested in finding the right information for you. But we have found that the neurons of some of these large networks, if you are nice to it, it becomes more optimistic. Hence the shirt, right? Like that's why I do this. That and, when Skynet happens, they know who's on. No, I'm just kidding. It's not gonna happen. But the second part of this rubric, right? Find out what your core values are. The second part of that is to figure out what risk looks like to you. Now, one of the things you should know about OpenAI's ChatGPT before it took over the world is it took 7 years to get to market. 7 years. Now, I don't know if you've been in an organization trying to do something that failed for 7 years before it worked. I've now realized some of the best creations in the world actually took 7 years or more. I am a big fan of Hamilton, not the location, but the musical. But I did take a picture of that sign on my way in, by the way. But I'm a huge fan of Lin-Manuel Miranda, and I found out it took him 7 years to write Hamilton. Found out a movie producer, his name's Tyler Perry, 7 years to build his first Broadway show. And Sam Altman talks all the time about how frustrating it is to go into a company every day for 7 years and have a model that doesn't work until it does. And then the world changes. And that is often the case. But if you do not have your core values identified, when it becomes hard, when you hit year 3 of everything not working, you might just say, do we really need to do this? Who needs to do this? I don't think we should do something else. Because your core values, who you are as a human, who you are as humanity, who you are as a empathetic, passionate supporter of a cause, if you don't have that passion tied to what you're doing in AI, you won't stay to do the hard work. AI is not an overnight success, even though it looks like it on TV, or an overnight failure, though it sometimes looks like it on TV. It is a continuous, constant, long-running effort. So I always tell people how important it is to first think about your core values and then figure out what's risky to you. I was in front of an audience of dairy farmers. I know, right? AI all the way. Dairy farmers in the middle of the United States. And I asked them what was risky to them. And it was Land O'Lakes. You might know them, maybe. But they're a big brand, a dairy brand in the US. And what they said was, if you go anywhere in the US and you ask people how they feel about Land O'Lakes, there's not a single negative thing that is said. People think sunshine and flowers, like they have a very positive feeling. So they're like, no matter what we do with this AI, it cannot hurt our brand. They had about 900 use cases that they wanted to consider with AI. After we removed the risk of hurting their brand, they were down to about 120. The next thing that allowed us to dwindle that down even further was to really think about what other things they were concerned about. Obviously, they wanted crop protection, but at what cost? So this analysis that we do with companies allows us to dwindle the list down, but the last rubric, the last step of that process to pick the right use case ends up being one that I often help with, which is how hard is it? How hard is it to do? So many companies try to boil the ocean with AI, try to do something grandiose. And the reality is the best AI projects solve one little problem. We call it a minimum remarkable solution. That you can build something remarkable. On Alexa, we found out 10 years ago that people had a hard time finding routing numbers, ABA routing numbers for banks. I don't know if you remember these days. It was like click, 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 and then they'd send you back and you'd have to start. It was a mess. As soon as we said, what if we just do one thing and allow you to just ask for it? Give me my routing number. Every customer, like customer satisfaction improved massively because they could just get what they needed when they needed it. And that was long before LLMs, but we've of course exponentially grown that capability. But it started with just one feature that helped one person or a group of people get one problem accomplished. It then built trust and excitement, and people got very excited. Now, in order for all of the projects that we used for them to see the light of day, to go from playground to production, we needed a very critical part, and this was the workforce. So I lead teams called AI red teams. It's very important that you understand this is not a noun, it's a verb. It's what you will do in your companies. And you will, in order to build a red team, you're looking for people who understand lots of different perspectives, a symphony of talent, if you will, right? People that think differently, like cat owners in Seattle, or a parent and nobody else is a parent. Like you want people that are constantly raising their hands. And you also, though, want on this team the people that would always say something, what's going to go wrong with that? How is this going to break? They're critical. We call them, in the US, sometimes people call them Debbie Downers. It's not a nice term. Buzzkills, I think I've been called before. Because everyone is on this huge high when you're building. Like at Alexa, we were like, everything's amazing. This is so cool. We got 100,000 users. We hit 1 million users. It was extremely exciting. It actually led me to this kind of thought that building AI systems is like building, it's like adopting baby tigers, right? Like you're getting this cute little baby tiger. Everyone around you is like, oh my gosh, it's so cute. I love this. I want to take a picture with it. Can we go viral on Instagram? It'll be awesome. And at that time, though, when everyone's all excited, no one's asking like, wow, your paws are pretty big. Like, how big are you going to get? Wow, those teeth, razor sharp, did you say? What do you eat? And how often do you need to get fed? No one's asking these questions. I ended up becoming a cat rescuer. I rescued cats during COVID. And do you know that when you rescue an animal, they interview you like FBI interview you, where they're like, so what are you going to do with these cats? And I kept thinking to myself, like, aren't they homeless? I don't understand. Like, I'm going to take them. Like, are you going to declaw them? What are you going to feed them? How often are you going to feed them? Do they have their own bowls, or are they going to have to share with other animals? Do you have other animals? We're going to need to come to your home and see how they're going to live for a homeless cat. And I had this moment where I was like, Okay, wait, I work in AI and we don't ask any of these questions. Unless someone like me is in the room like, has anyone thought how this might hurt someone? So baby tigers are super exciting. Everyone wants to be around them, but we require people in the room who are gonna love the baby tiger, yes, but who are also gonna be brave enough to raise their hand and say, I know everyone's excited, but have we thought how this might kill us all? And it's literally that simple. You don't have to be a technologist. As a matter of fact, the best AI ethicists are not technologists. They're people who are in criminology and decided to move into AI. AI is a learned skill. Ethics, yeah, it's harder. If you are drawn to how do we use this technology for good, then we have a new opportunity. And that is where the world I live in, where a lot of people are drawn to this technology because they have a problem they want to solve and they're passionate for it. Now, in the last couple minutes, we're actually going to take some questions, so now's your chance to get them in the Slido app. But I always like to ask and see how familial we are, if we are indeed family. Let's see if you know this one. With great power comes... Okay, so 17 of you, awesome, great. That's usually the ratio, or you're introverted, and that's fine too. But yes, with great power comes great responsibility. We are in a world where AI will influence every single product, every single service, everything that we build. And being responsible, yesterday I had a chance to talk to some media professionals, and I told them being responsible, it's like the water in a wave. It's not like a raisin on a bun that you stick in at the last minute or confetti you sprinkle on a cookie at the end. It's a way of being. It's a way of building. And most companies have people that are like this, but oftentimes, well, we get beat down by people being like, really? Again, Noelle, with your questions? Again, Noelle, with your divergent thinking? But AI requires this now. So if you are that person, like, yay, that's your time. If you're a Debbie Downer, woo, welcome to the party. Like, it could not be a better time for people who are willing to ask better questions. These are just some of the use cases that we've uncovered from the Fortune 100 that they're building AI systems for. But I want to highlight for you just 4 of them. This is what they've successfully started investing in. And fun fact, we had a research study done by IDC, a research organization, and they found that for every $1 you put into a responsibly built AI project, you can get $3 back on average. Some very special people, 8% of this group, got $8 back. They didn't do it by accident. They were very intentional. They picked the right use case. They harnessed a good AI red team, and they built use cases that were less risky and less complex. But they got $1, like they got $3 back for every dollar. I'm like, how do I get into that business? Those are the businesses we want to be in. And here's the best part about that is that it's every one of your businesses. It's how do we help more customers? How do we deliver more value? How do we reach more audiences? So I'm a big fan of learning by doing. We are now in a world where you can talk to your tech. You can take a picture of a napkin and have it generate an image. You can build a website on a whiteboard and have the code generated for you. And of course, I'm a big fan of teaching you how to do that. So I, last year, trained 2,000 people in their spare time, Jeff Bezos style, on the weekends. And this is the exact guide I gave them. The classes have changed. All of them are free. Like it's not you're not going there to like buy courses. It's a free training. Because again, I'm asking people who work for me to go work on their own and learn this tech before everyone thought it'd be cool. But learning by doing, getting your fingers on a keyboard and becoming a practitioner, becoming a builder, and then being willing to ask the most important question, how do we make sure we don't kill ourselves? How do we make sure that our baby tigers become big tigers that we care for, that we provide guardrails for, that we provide safety for? So thanks for having me today. We're gonna answer a couple questions, and I'll welcome Jack back up to the stage.